At this time, I'm going to ask that you fasten your seatbelts.
Launch sequence.
Launch sequence activated.
Launch sequence activated.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Woo! Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Launchcast. I love this music. Episode 107 entitled It's My Party and I'll Float If I Want to. We have an incredible guest on today. I am so excited. You are here today with the launch dad himself, George Andriopoulos, bringing you your favorite podcast on the planet. And we are talking leadership, we are talking business, we are talking life, and we are talking growth. And we're doing it all today with my guest, Mr. Bobby Rubio. What's happening, Bobby?
Hey, how's it going, George?
So nice to have you here, Bobby. So I want to jump right in. So Bobby Rubio, guys, is the writer and director of the Pixar Spark Shorts film Float, which is streaming right now on Disney+. So you got to download that right now, guys, because it is an incredible piece. He is currently working with Pixar Animation Studios on a top secret project as a story artist. Bobby has worked on many well-known projects, including Incredibles 2, Up, Inside Out, Cars 2, Brave, Monsters University, Avatar: The Last Airbender. He has also worked as a freelance comic cover artist for Marvel Entertainment. I got to tell you, man, before we jump in, you are living my childhood dream, dude.
Oh, thanks, man.
Yeah,
Appreciate
it was my dream to actually be a comic book artist when I was a kid.
Oh, for real? Did you draw to? Oh, no.
I did. No, I totally
Oh,
did.
you did?
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, I would think so. You're in New York. Marvel was there. Did you ever visit Marvel?
I didn't visit Marvel. I had a very well. I was the child of immigrants, so I had a very sheltered childhood.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I would walk down to the corner store every single week, buy the new comic books, take them home, trace them, try and learn how to draw them, and yeah, man, I respect what you do so much because it's just it was always such a passion of mine. So that's why I was so drawn to doing this interview with you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, man.
I've loved comics since I was a kid, and and actually it was probably the best thing I could go to. Like my mom was like, "You got the talent, your education wise, I don't know, maybe you should be an artist." It seemed like that was the route. My path was to be an artist. So I mean, and it's worked so far, so it's all good.
Yeah, it has definitely worked, man. I'm going to ask you the question that we start with
Okay.
all our guests here on the show, Bobby. Are you a leader?
I am.
Talk to me about that. What is your definition of a leader?
My definition of a leader is a person that looks out for his team, and he or she also takes care of his people and encourages them to do the best possible work they can, and they collaborate and they try to create this atmosphere where anything can be thrown, any stories or any situation can be given to me, and I'd like to take care of my team, and I'd like to think that I'm a fair leader, and so that's how I see as a leader, is a person that takes care of his team and his people around him and makes sure that everything works out moving forward with your story and in animation.
Sure. So that team concept is something that we really stress on this podcast. So you and I talked about this, but this podcast is really about leadership and the unconventional journey too. So I love when our audience gets to listen to these different perspectives. We've had such an array of guests on this show, the very few guests that we've had so far. And it's so cool to see these different journeys and how our guests have attained leadership. And what it really does is the through line is that anybody could really do this, right?
Right.
In terms of being a leader. And so that concept of the team, that's that's an idea that we sort of hear from most of the leaders that we've spoken about, and it seems to be a common trait. How important has your team, whether it's been the team you work with or your team at home, how important has your team been in terms of supporting your success?
Oh, very much so. From home, I think of my wife, who has gone through me working in LA. I worked at Disney, and I brought my family up here to Oakland, and she was very supportive. And she also, we discussed it. We discussed my career. So she was like, I think that Pixar is probably the best route right now for you. So as far as, yeah, that being a team, I could bounce ideas off of her. Is it best if we stay in LA, or should we take this risk and go to Oakland? And luckily she is a good sounding board of where my career should go. As far as my team here at Pixar, when it was Float, I have a producer, an amazing producer, Chrissy Kababa, who I was able to bounce ideas off of, and she was great with the storyline of Float. And not only that, I also had an editor, Greg. Greg was amazing. He helped us fine tune our story, and I try to create this atmosphere where everyone, like I said, Greg or Chrissy, can come aboard and contribute to the story and make our story even better. That's Greg Amundsen. I want to mention that.
Yeah, and what an incredible story it was.
Thank you.
Let's kind of go start early on. So you grew up in San Diego, California, right?
Yes, I did.
All right. And so throughout your journey, did the research on you, saw that you went to California Institute of the Arts until from 91 to 94. You attended Morse High School before that. What was life like for Bobby Rubio in terms of attaining the end goal of being a comic book artist and eventually an animator, storyteller? What was life like for Bobby Rubio growing up trying to attain that dream?
Okay. Well, I'm a son of an immigrant too. So like my parents are from the Philippines. My dad was in the Navy. My mother had her own shop where she made clothes and sewing shop. And so I saw them work very hard, and especially my mother. I was usually with her in the shop, and my mother was really great. She, by having a store, a Filipino lady in the 80s, to have her own store, it showed me that things were possible, that you could be your own boss. And I saw that in my mother. My mother encouraged me to draw my own comics when I was in 6th grade. And here in San Diego, we have the San Diego Comic Con. So when I was younger, I would draw comic book pages, and then I would go to the Comic Con at 16, showing editors, Marvel editors, and other comic book editors my artwork, and I would get feedback. And I think it was great that there was the Comic Con, because then at 16, I was actually talking to real professional editors, and it started opening my world into that this is a possibility. And so I think that also started the leadership qualities. Sure. by like now I'm actually starting this business. And I actually got my job after college, though. I went to Cal Arts, and then Cal Arts, of course, you learn the trade. And after Cal Arts, I got an internship, which led to Disney and also another comic book company. But the beginning phases, as you're talking about my childhood years in San Diego, I've learned leadership through my mother and through trying to be a comic book artist through the Comic Con, trying to become a comic book artist at the early age of 16.
Did you have any heroes within the comic industry that influenced you throughout that time?
Um, yes, my favorite comic book artist was George Perez, and he's from New York and he's Puerto Rican. But I actually thought he was Filipino because like the Spanish last name, I was like, oh, George Perez, he might be Filipino. But I mean, it's cool that I thought that was cool too because when I saw his comic covers and I saw a Spanish name on it, I felt like, wow, empowered that, okay, maybe this guy's Filipino. I'm Filipino. I could do this. So,
Sure.
but not only that, I mean, of course, we all love Stan Lee and Jack Kirby and all the comic book greats. And so those guys were also my heroes. And I'm so grateful to have met Stan Lee and while he was here. So yeah, those guys were definitely my heroes.
Yeah, I saw a picture that you would posted on social media of that, and I couldn't even imagine standing next to the guy. You know, not just because of my affinity for comics themselves, but I'm such a fan of like the entire MCU and everything
Right.
that they've done with that. It must have been insane being with the
It
guy.
is. Because, like, when you stop and think about it, like, he was kind of like our Walt Disney.
Yeah.
He created this entire world. I mean, when you think of creators, the top creators now, you're like, Stan's got to be top 3
Yeah.
at very least. And, like, to meet him and, wow, all this wealth of stories and rich characters that he created, it was incredible to be in that room, and I was so inspired and so grateful that I had my time with him.
Oh, that's so cool, man. I had an experience when I was a kid. We did this summer program called Summer Horizons, right? It was basically like a school for like we have a gifted and talented program here where
Oh,
I'm
cool.
from. And so we were doing this summer program, and one of the kids in the program, I recognized his last name, and I just figured it was because he was from the same town. And then we wound up doing some kind of project that was based on comics. And all of a sudden, he comes in one day with this heap of comics, and I'm like, you know, the teacher's like, oh no, I'm sorry, the teacher knew. We were kind of like, what is this about? And he's like, oh, my dad's a comic book artist for DC Comics.
Oh, sweet.
Bob Rozakis.
Oh, cool.
And he gave us this brand new series, and I cannot think of the name of it. Too, I was obsessed with it because it was like these anti-hero teams. Oh
Okay.
man, it was so cool for me. It really like fueled at the time my desire. But
Yeah.
hey, look where I am now. I didn't make it.
You got your own business. You're doing a podcast. You're like,
I'm not complaining. I'm not complaining. But
Nah,
in
man.
an alternate life, man, that was it. So so you mentioned comic books. After Cal Arts, you did an internship with Disney and Jim Lee with Disney and one with Jim Lee at Image Comics, right?
Yes.
So talk
Yes.
about that a little bit.
Okay. So straight after Cal Arts, I had a choice to where do I go? Both comics and animation wanted me. So I went to animation first. I went to Disney in Florida. I don't know, have you ever been to Disney World and in the past where they had the animation, there was the fishbowl where you could see the animators actually working behind the scenes?
No, I haven't. I don't think I've been there since 1986, probably.
Oh, okay, because it's gone now. But during the time when they were working on Mulan and Lilo and Stitch, you could walk by and see the animators behind glass as they were working in Florida. So I did an internship in Disney World, Florida, as an animator, and I learned animation there for, I believe I was there 3 months. And then after that, in the fall, I went to go to Image Comics in San Diego, where I'm from, and Jim Lee was the X-Men comic book artist, and now he had his own studio, and I did an internship with him. And then after the internship, I was like, Jim, I want to be a comic book artist. I think I would like to stay here. But he told me, you know what? If I were you, the comic book industry is dying right now. Marvel just went bankrupt in 1994.
Yeah.
And if I were you, I would go into animation. And so I followed his lead, and then I went to LA to Disney, and my first movie was Pocahontas. So, but I am grateful that Jim was like, for your sake, you probably should go that other direction.
Yeah,
and
which was great advice at the time, because
Yes.
when you look back at I happen to be such a comic book buff in terms of the historical data behind it, and that was the time when Marvel dumped properties in terms of the filming rights
right,
that
right,
caused this whole split of X-Men going to Fox and Spider-Man going to Sony, and
right,
stuff that they're still trying to reconcile today.
right. Yeah, you're kind of like, had that not had happened, maybe we wouldn't have had the great MCU we had today. Maybe in some weird parallel world, there is no MCU.
Isn't that insane? Because I remember that they sort of leaned on Iron Man as that first major character, and
Right.
people were kind of like, the non-comic book aficionados are like, who's Iron Man?
Right, right. Why don't they do Spider-Man? You're like,
Yeah.
because they can't. They don't own Spider-Man.
Yeah. Oh, so crazy. And so you move on to you started working on Pocahontas, training to be an animator, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
then you made animator on Treasure Planet,
Yes.
and then 2D animation. Talk about what happened with that.
Oh, okay. And then 2D animation kind of died because of this company called Pixar. and I'm like,
Pixar.
I know, right? Ah. I had a buddy who was working at Pixar at the time, and I was working on Treasure Planet, and he was like, "Hey, man, we're working on this superhero family movie." And I was like, "Oh, I so want to work on that. What is it?" And he's like, "I can't tell you." And of course, it's Incredibles.
Sure.
And so I I was like, you know what? I am going to Pixar, and one day I am going to work on Incredibles 2. And I did. Of course, it took 14 years for that to happen, but it happened. So, but I'm so happy that it did.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So you sort of make your way there eventually. You eventually went to Pixar, and you've been there for 12 years. I want to take a break from that just to touch on family a bit. So
Okay.
you're married. You've been married since '97 to your wife Susan, right? And
Yes.
you have 3 wonderful kids,
Yes.
Harrison, and then your twins Alex and Will, right?
That's correct.
So when we spoke yesterday, and of course, it's no secret with your short float. What the idea is behind it. But when we spoke yesterday, you were very candid with me about your son Alex being diagnosed as on the spectrum, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
So the idea for Float is one that you had been carrying for 12 years, from what I read.
Yes.
And when your son was 2 years old and he was diagnosed with autism, you explained how difficult the diagnosis was for you to handle, which eventually led to a suggestion from your wife. So do you want to get into that story a little bit?
Sure. Okay. So my son was diagnosed at 2.5, and it was like Christmas time, actually. And I didn't know at the time, but I was going through a depression. I was in my bedroom under the covers in the dark. I remember my brother came over, and he was playing with my sons, and he was like playing with Alex and Will and Harrison, and he saw that I was locked in my room, and he's like, "Bobby, what's going on?" And I told him, Alex has autism, and he didn't know how. He tried his best to make Christmas good, and my wife, like a couple months went by, and my wife was like, you can't continue on like this. You gotta, you're a storyteller. Why don't you tell this story? And you're a comic book artist, so why don't you do that? And so I took that, I took that advice, and I decided to make Alex the comic book. And I drew this cover, and I believe it's also on the Pixar Spark Shorts extras. You could see the cover, and the cover is this image of a father and his son. They're standing in a field of dandelions, and the sun is floating. And it was called Alex at the time, and the tagline was, I believe it's a father's journey and a special child.
Yep.
And I was full on gonna do it, but emotionally I wasn't ready. So I put that comic book aside, and then I didn't go back to it until about 3 years later, and I decided it's time. I think I'm ready, and I started drawing storyboards for it, and those storyboards I eventually pitched to the executive producer of Spark Shorts, which is Lindsay Collins. I showed it to Lindsay. Lindsay thought it was perfect candidate for the Spark Shorts program, and that's how Float was made.
Yeah, what a great opportunity. And from what I read about the way Pixar works, Pixar releases one movie every couple of years, right? Or at least I read that in an article. And so the best way to sort of get a project out there was to do a short with Spark Shorts, right? At the time.
Well, I believe Spark Shorts came about. Well, we didn't even know that there was going to be a Disney Plus platform at the time.
Sure.
In fact, I think the program we were just doing it just to give other people opportunities to learn how to make a film here at Pixar, and luckily, the Disney Plus streaming service came about, and now we can put the Spark Shorts on there, and it just happened to work that way. At least that's how I saw it. I don't know. Maybe behind the scenes, we always knew that it was going to go there, but they never told me. I was just under the impression that we're making this film, and we hope there's a place to put Float somewhere down the line.
Well, that's where we discovered it. Honestly, we got Disney Plus day one.
Yeah.
And my kids and I were tooling around and saw Float.
Yeah.
And I go, oh man, this is great. And I had got to make a couple of calls, and I had contacted Dave Thompson, that we both know, and yeah, it was incredible. We watch those shorts all the time, not just Float, but our favorite is the 4-key ones.
Oh, okay, nice. Yeah, Bob Peterson makes those, and those are funny. Those are hilarious.
Oh, those are great. We spent, my kids and I must have spent a good hour just quoting those last night. It was great.
Oh, nice. Nice. That's funny.
So the message of Float is about sharing and celebrating our differences, in essence, right? And since its debut on Disney Plus, and this is something that I love, I read this somewhere on the internet, Float has enabled people to bring their own interpretations to the story through its metaphor of floating, whether it's being brown, being LGBTQ, or just being unique. People are talking about representation and how it matters. They're sharing what this means to them and its importance. And that was a quote from Chrissy Kababa, the producer, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And so that was what was so unique when we first checked out Float, because my interpretation initially was autism, but I'm looking at it and I'm like, you know what? This could mean anything. This is really, it was just so ingeniously done, man.
Thank you. Oh. Yeah, that's why we put the word difference at the end. I didn't say dedicated to all children of autism, because and also once you find out also too with autism, you talk to one kid who has autism, you've only talked to one kid with autism. Everyone's different.
Yeah.
And so, but I saw when I was pitching it around originally people were interpreting the floating as different. It depended on which person I was talking to. I did talk to a buddy of mine who interpreted it as like he said, "I get it, man. I get it. I have a daughter who wants to be an artist, and I know that that's not. I don't want her to be an artist because like her future, I don't know how that road will go about." And so I metaphorically put rocks in her backpack to stop her from doing what she wants. But I realize at the end, I gotta let her go, let her do her own thing, and I gotta accept that she's an artist.
Yeah.
Because I'm miserable, and she's miserable.
Yeah.
And once I've done that, and once I've learned to accept and celebrate her for who she is, then everything was great. And I was listening to his interpretation, and I was like, "Yeah, you're right. That's pretty much it."
Yeah.
I didn't want to tell him no, it's autism. It actually made me feel great about it, that it resonates in a different kind of way.
Yeah.
And so it's funny, like I kind of just wasn't planning that, but I'm so glad that it worked out that way.
Well, that's the thing about art, right? That's the thing about art is that every set of eyes has a totally different interpretation of what art is.
Right.
So it's really interesting when somebody sits down and looks at a piece like Float and gives you their interpretation, because it kind of makes you realize where their mindset is at, and what matters to them. And
Yes.
so somebody may say, "Oh, that could be a child with autism. That could be a child that feels different, a child that's LGBTQ." And so it's so beautiful, man. And as a leader, and this is what I really wanted to get into with this.
Okay.
I relate with you on a few different levels. One is the importance of being a leader as a father, right?
Right.
And of course, now you're working with a medium. You're not just Bobby Rubio that people don't know anymore. You're the creator of Float. You're the writer and director of Float, and this is a story that's very personal to you. And so there's a point as a leader where when you put a piece of work out, a piece of art out, or an expression of yourself, where it shifts from, "Hey, I'm just putting this out," to what's my responsibility now that I'm putting this out there to do the right thing with it.
Right.
You know what I mean? So
Yes.
Talk about that from the perspective of being a dad. Like what kind of responsibility you felt with this piece as a father putting this out there.
Yeah, interesting enough is I remember when I was doing this, one of the themes that I was thinking of was somebody told me somebody told me this quote, and I love it. That and it applies to the short, is that at first I wanted to change my kid to fit the world, and now I want to change the world to fit my kid. And I took that to heart, and that's what I want to do. I want to change this world to fit my child. And I know eventually he's going to be a man, and I'm hoping that when he is, that this world will know more about autism, and it wouldn't be this weird thing. They would look at him like, "Oh, I get it. I understand why he sways or why he spins. It's because he is on the spectrum, but that doesn't make him less of a person. He's a person." And I hope it becomes normalized where they're like, "Oh, it's just Alex. It's not Alex who has autism. It's not a kid with autism. It's Alex." So that's my hope.
Right.
And as a father, that's what I'm trying to do, is create a world for him, a better world for him.
Was there a moment during this, and what I mean by moment is I speak about this on my podcast and in my leadership coaching that I do. I have this concept of what I call a spark moment, and that spark moment is basically just any pivotal moment in your life where you either in the moment, or you look back and you realize, hey, that was a big moment in either a positive or a negative way that really caused this shift. Was there a spark moment for you during the creation of this project, when it got really serious, right, with Pixar, where you kind of realized the gravity of what you were doing?
I guess once the reactions came in from people after it came out, like I thought it was just like, oh, just a few people are gonna get it. But when the reactions started flooding in, and I started seeing, as you said, now I've become like some representative, and for not only the autism community but also the Filipino American community, and that's when the I guess the spark hit. Like you said, now it's not just me messing around and okay, it's a fun picture out there. Now I have to talk on behalf of the autism community and the Filipino American community, and I welcome it. I'm grateful for that opportunity because we don't have a lot of representation. And if it is up to me, then I relish the chance to do so, to talk on our behalf, because we don't have a lot of people talking on our behalf.
That's incredible. And that was going to be my next question, and maybe I'll frame it a little differently. Is
Sure.
I was going to ask you if you're okay with this role, but I think I'll reframe it as, did you want that responsibility?
If you asked me 2 or 3 years ago, I'd be like, no, I really don't. If you asked me at the beginning when I was in my deepest depression, I would be, hell no, I don't want this. And so I am surprised, and I am, but not also. I mean, I've come through this journey, and now I am cool with the responsibility, and I'm ready for it. And it's great, like talking to you and people around the world. I feel like, oh, you guys are willing to listen to me. that also encourages me to do more and want to tell more and get this word out even more so. So yeah.
Well, I'll give you a little feedback on that, man. As somebody who made a big shift in his life, I know we don't know each other very well. We're just getting to know each other. But about 10 years ago, I was a guy that was, only concerned about money and success. And I was a corporate guy in the medical industry, and it was something that, the better I did personally in terms of money, that was my measure of life. And then everything fell apart, man. Everything fell apart. I built this ego that was like, I couldn't fit my head through a doorway, and I thought I was
Right.
invincible, and it all fell apart. And I found myself divorced with 2 little kids, and just alone and really like depressed for the first time in my life. I never knew what that felt like. And so when I got to that point, which was a low point for me, it was a rock bottom point, just in terms of how I felt. And I decided to rebuild. I rebuilt with purpose. And with that purpose came just this new open mindset, open to new things. And I'm so happy to have discovered this life where I get to talk to people like you, other leaders. We both know, my buddy Mark Cordone, who's an incredible human too. And I'm going to save, although I want to touch on the culture stuff, I'm going to save some of that for you and him to talk about, because that is totally his wheelhouse. But I do want to touch on some of it. But I get to meet people like you and Mark and all these other thought leaders that are out there. And I'm telling you right now, as a person that takes the stage very often to speak on a stage, every voice is important. And if we have a skill set and we have something important to say that could help the world and we're not doing it, what are we doing here, man? What's the point?
Yeah, you're right.
So I commend you for doing this, especially for somebody that didn't necessarily want that responsibility when you were in a different mindset, and now you've embraced it and you're doing good things with it, man. It's awesome.
Thanks, George. I really appreciate that, man.
So All right, guys. See you later.
Terminated.
Into the black